Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this second ELS training on legislative drafting. Our first session was not particularly on drafting of laws or policies. It focused more on legal drafting generally and was presented by David Lacey. That was just about 2 weeks ago. And we've decided to have this continuation to create new skills that will enable you to not only be good legal practitioners, but also people who can, command the things you put down, especially when you do laws or policies or other, corporate or country defining documents. And so today we have two very senior drafters from Kenya. From Kenya, we have Dr. Johnson Okello. He's the head of legal or legal director legal affairs of the Senate. You're aware Kenya has has two houses, the National Assembly and the Senate. So he heads the legal department at the Senate. So all those bills coming out of the Senate have to go through his hands. And if you've read some of them, you will bear me testimony that they are thoroughly done. Thank you, Dr. Our next presenter, who I will not introduce, I will let Dr. Okello introduce, is Dr. Clinton Jaja, all the way from Nigeria. Thank you, Dr. Clinton, for creating time for us. We really appreciate. And so I'm going to take this back to Dr. Okello, who will be our moderator for the day and who will officially introduce our presenter and take the session further. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Okello.
Thank you, David, for that elaborate introduction. I don't want to take much of our time. As all of us can see, the session is on use of information communication technology, what we acronym as ICT tools in legislative drafting. Of course, legislative drafting is a trade that very few, I hope you can hear me, but very few of us have experience and expertise in, but it becomes even more technical when we are talking about the use of ICT in these matters. So I look forward to quite an engaging and interesting session, how we can apply these ICT tools in legislative drafting. And I think widely, even in legal research and drafting generally. And there's no better person who is placed to take us through this session other than Dr. Tony Clinton Jaja. Dr. Clinton is my senior. We met at the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, University of London. He was doing his PhD then, and I was doing my master's. So I have quite some background about Dr. Clinton. So in him, I'm sure we'll be able to learn quite a lot. Dr. Clinton holds a Master's of Laws degree, LLM, and a PhD in legislative drafting degree from the University of London. That makes the holders of this PhD degree in legislative drafting, there are very few. We are countable. I can tell you that. He is currently the acting head of bills and legislative drafting at the National Institute for Legislative Studies, Nigeria. I normally like calling Dr. brother, so he has also served as the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Legislative Drafting and Law Reform. This, of course, is a publication that is indexed by the British Library, United Kingdom. And if you have had a chance to look at some of the publication, very, very serious publication. We have the who is who in the world of drafting and law reform, presenting, writing papers in this publication. So Dr. Clinton is best placed to introduce us. I know he cannot train us, especially lawyers who fear ICT, but introduce us and maybe raise that desire to know more and learn more. What are these tools that you can use? What is it that is available, readily available, without spending so much money to buy some of these things? I know we can use the Microsoft Word and all that. So Daktari will be introducing us into all this, and hopefully it can help us facilitate our work in drafting, legal research, legislative drafting, and even drafting of other legal documents in our day-to-day operation. So Dr. Clinton, in Swahili we say karibu sana. And when you hear me saying daktari, daktari is a Swahili word for doctor. So don't feel lost. So colleagues, join me to welcome Dr. Clinton to take us through. He has 1.5 hours, then we'll have 30 minutes for questions and answers. Karibu, Dr. Clinton.
Namaste. Namaste, Dr. Johnson. I think it's hot in this part of Nigeria. I don't know about Kenya. So I'm already sweating. You bear with me. So it is a pleasure to be here with all of you. I am very delighted to join my colleague, Dr. Johnson Okello. We met at, it's over 10 years now at the University of London. And I am doing this because my government sponsored me to do a PhD in legislative drafting, so I didn't pay. I'm sure his government also sponsored him. So I owe it to my fellow Africans to also share with you the knowledge I received from the university. I lecture in the LLM, that is Master of Law in Legislative Drafting Program. The University of Benin awards the certificate, but we at the National Institute for Legislative Studies here in Abuja, we conduct the training. It's a 2-year training. We also have a diploma program. So as the moderator said, it will be impossible to teach you what we teach them in 2 years in less than 2 hours. So as the moderator mentioned, this will be an introduction just to give you ideas of how you can use what you have to do legislative drafting. Before I start, I'm going to share with you a 2-minute video. Bear with us. It's going to be on the screen. A 2-minute video, please.
Introducing the Aldrap Legislative Drafting Assistant. Aldrap Legislative Drafting Assistant is a simple tool that will help you to draft the law. Aldrap Legislative Drafting can be downloaded from Google Play Store or App Store. It can also be
Incredible.
Doctor, the volume is a bit low. Can you?
Volume is low. Increase it. Start again. Start. Increase it. Yes, they can see. Increase the volume. Increase the volume. Okay. They said the volume is low.
Can be downloaded from Google Play Store or the App Store. It can also be accessed by visiting okagents.com. Sign up on the app and log in. This takes you to the home page where it prompts you to choose what type of legislation you are drafting. Is it a fresh bill or an amendment, depending on your choice? If you choose an amendment bill, it is going to give you the option of choosing from our existing laws for amendment. You have the option of the jurisdiction. Is it a federal or a bylaw? After making your choices, type in the title and click on continue. This takes you to the next page. The next page gives you the options for the 4 main parts of every bill: the preliminary provisions, the principal provisions, the miscellaneous provisions, and your final provisions. After keying in these parts of the bill, you get a preview. Your work remains editable. You can click on whatever you want and then edit it to suit what you are drafting. We are available for in-house presentations on how this legislative drafting software can be used. To make things even easier, we have a handy and easy to use tab that makes it very workable. Now, here's the good thing. The app comes with this tab. You can easily walk through the entire process with this tab. All you need to do is ensure that the tab is on. You have a link, takes you to the website, and you follow through the process. Once you're done drafting your bill, you can preview it here. Aldrap Legislative Drafting Assistant and tab are tools that will help you to achieve effective legislative drafting.
Hello. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I wanted to begin with that. Over the course of 15 years, when I graduated from the LLM in legislative drafting, I got together a team of computer experts. We started working on how to design a simple, very simplified software that can help us draft bills and legislation. And this is what we came up with. It's called Aldrap. Aldrap is a short form of Association of Legislative Drafting and Advocacy Practitioners. So this is something we have designed. It's a very simple tool. You don't need to be a computer expert. Once you're a lawyer, you know that every law has 4 parts: preliminary provisions, principal provision, miscellaneous provisions, and final provisions. So this software will take you through each of these. So anytime you want to draft a bill, you don't need to start afresh. You already have a sample of these parts of the bill. You now adjust it, edit it to suit. So I am going to make available this software for every participant today. I have discussed with Mr. David. Please share with us your email address and if you have a WhatsApp number, you can share. We can email this software for those who are interested. We are giving it at a discounted rate. In January last year, I was in the Gambia to install this software. The Ministry of Justice, the Minister of Justice invited me. They have over 20 lawyers in the drafting. We train them on how to use this software. And for those of you who have also attended this session, we are giving you free copies of the Legislative Drafting Law Journal. We started in 2012. So we have 10 editions. That is 10 years from 2012. So we are going to give you electronic copies free of charge. Then for those who participate during the question and answer, we have a book here. If you get the answer right, we'll give you a copy of this book. For those who participate, the legislative drafting manual has, the software has a manual. So this is the manual. We have the electronic copy. So when you get the manual, you also, you get the software, you get the manual to also. So feel free, please, to send your emails and your WhatsApp numbers. Can you type where they can send it to? Type it on the screen. Somebody will type where to send it to, where you can send your emails and WhatsApp numbers to, so that we can. So in the chat box, I've put where you can send all your, and I'm also going to put my WhatsApp number where you can also send. So those that send, you get the free copies of electronic copies, 10 copies of the Legislative Drafting Law Journal. As the moderator mentioned, The articles in that law journal were written by experts in legislative drafting from all over the world. All over, when I say all over the world. So now, to begin, I will start with opening slide, please. No, not that. There's something, Lord Denning. I hope we all know Lord Denning, a judge from the United Kingdom. Lord Denning is his name. Opening slide, please. Opening slide. Check your opening slides. Sorry, give me a minute. Let's get the opening slide. Now, Lord Denning was a judge of the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. This is something he said. I want to share it with you. It should be the background, the basis. He said, God forbid that a lawyer knows all the law, but a good lawyer is one who knows where to find the law. So it is impossible for any lawyer to boast that he knows all the law, everything there is to know about even an area of law. No, that cannot be. But he says a good lawyer knows where to find the law. So this is a mindset we should have. Legislative drafting is a discipline of the legal profession. It's an aspect of the legal profession. It is impossible for you to know everything there is to know about even this small area of the law, legislative drafting. However, you should be able to know where to go to find the law. So this is a mindset we should have when it comes to legislative drafting. Now, this is the, go raise the other slide. This is the manual. Some years ago, I worked with a Canadian lawyer. Her name is Chantel Lamera. She's from Canada. We developed a manual for how lawyers can use ICT. ICT means computers, internet, everything about information technology. Phone, even your telephone is an ICT tool. So over 10 years ago, we worked together, we developed a simple to use manual. Chantel is a lawyer. She works with Aerosoft. Aerosoft is an information technology company. They develop software for drafting, but we did a more simplified manual. So this is the manual that we use for the legislative drafting software. So when we get your email, we'll share this manual with you. Now, before I begin, I'd like to say something. The kind of, why do we attend formal training in legislative drafting? Now, the difference between a mechanic and an automobile engineer, what is the difference? I want you to participate. So I'm going to, if you want to say something, you can raise your hand. What is the difference between a mechanic and an automobile engineer? What is the difference between an architect and a bricklayer? You can raise your hand if you want to participate. Yes. Benson King Yua, please, you can answer. Unmute yourself and participate. Benson Yinmua, something like that. You can use your mic, please. Unmute yourself and use the mic.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
I
we
can
can
hear
hear you, Benson.
For me, I think the difference between the two, actually, and the more, one is actually more involved in the design process, and the other, the mechanic, is more on the repair and maintenance. I think that's, for me, would be the difference between the two.
Thank you, Benson. Does anyone have another comment? What is the difference between an engineer and a mechanic? Engineer, automobile engineer, and a mechanic. What is the difference? Yes, raise your hand. Let's see. Participants 5, raised hand. Let's see. How do you see that? Who raised hand? Scroll down. Let's see. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. I can't see. Click on the. Okay, can we get? You're not getting. Achillus, Martin, Mata. Can you answer? Martin, Mata. What is the difference between an automobile engineer and a mechanic, roadside mechanic? You can unmute yourself to answer. Hello, Martin, Mata. What are you doing now? Show me the screen. Hello.
Yes, Martin, go ahead. We can hear you.
Show me the screen.
Martin Masai. Probably we can choose someone else.
I can't even see the names raising their hands. Okay,
we have Murithi Kanampiu.
Okay, can you unmute and answer, Murithi? There's also Murithi Kana something.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, Murithi, we can hear you.
To me, and thank you for this opportunity. An engineer mostly creates the major components to an engine, while a mechanic fixes and or maintains the creation of the automotive engineers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you all for your comments. To save time, both of them, an automobile engineer, a mechanic, both of them can repair a car. Can they not? They can. An architect and a bricklayer, both of them can build a house. Now I'm seeing the comment of Derek Monma. He has given me the correct answer. He said the difference is that one of them attends training, advanced training. I like to use the word formal training. A mechanic undergoes informal training, on-the-job training. He learns trial by error. That's what a mechanic does. But an engineer undergoes formal training in whatever field he is. He knows the science behind the engine, but a mechanic does not know the science. He just does trial and error. The reason I'm using this analogy is, as a lawyer, you can draft a bill. You can draft legislation by looking at precedents, but that is what a mechanic does, trial and error. But when you undergo formal training in legislative drafting, you become an engineer. You upgrade yourself to becoming an engineer, because it is when you undergo the formal training, you now acquire the knowledge, the science. Why are bills like this? The structure of a bill, the science behind legislative drafting. You know, when we were in secondary school, we learned the scientific method. It involves observation, hypothesis, experiments before you arrive at a conclusion. It's not just copy and paste. So in legislative drafting, there is a method, there's a science. You need to understand it before you even start drafting. But most of us from the Commonwealth jurisdiction, we are told that once you're a lawyer, you can draft. But those of us that have attended the formal training, we understand that, look, even the structure of a bill, it took over 200 years. Lawyers like George Coode, they designed it. And over time, we see that this is a tried and tested method. So this is why this formal training is to change your mindset, change our mindset from being mechanics, copying precedents. Anytime they say draft a bill, you just go online, copy a precedent from Kenya or from any country. In some cases, even in our country, Nigeria, we wanted to create terrorism courts. Somebody went online, a lawyer went, copied from India. It was so bad that even when he copied, he did not remove India. So he was terrorism courts of India here in Nigeria. When we saw it, we were laughing. At our institute, we scrutinize bills before it goes to, when it comes to our National Assembly. So most times you come across what happens when lawyers, private lawyers, most of the legislators engage them as consultants. So we want to change your mindset from that being a mechanic to becoming an engineer. An engineer is one that applies the scientific method. He has undergone formal training. He knows why things are the way they are. And he knows, first, when you have that knowledge, then you can apply it to drafting. So this is the whole mindset we want you to have, to move away from being a bricklayer. A bricklayer can build a building. However, an architect understands the science. Where should there be a pillar in the building so that the building does not collapse? In Nigeria, we have been having problems. Buildings are always collapsing because those buildings are built by bricklayers who do not understand the science. As an architect who understands the structure of a building, where do you put the long title, where do you put short title, and all those devices. So this is the mindset we want you to have. If you have that mindset alone, I'll be happy that this lecture has not been in vain. So have the mindset that you want to move away from being a mechanic to becoming an engineer when it comes to legislative drafting. So with that mindset, let's go to how can we use information ICT tools for legislative drafting. So there's a slide. I don't know if, can you see the slide? David, confirm.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So I'll quickly go through the slide. Next slide, please. Now, information technology, communication technology is, I mentioned computers, phone, even the internet, anything, tablet that can be used to communicate. Now, legislative drafting is a form of communication. The government has an idea, a policy. You want to communicate it to the citizens. Citizens are the ones who obey the law. So how can we use this information ICT tools to communicate the law to the public, members, the citizens? Now, we can make the legislative task automated, thereby saving time. Now, these are the specific ways we can use ICT in legislative drafting. You can use it to draft a new bill, or you can use it to amend an existing bill. Now, when it comes to amendment of bill, in Nigeria, we have 552 laws in the Laws of the Federation 2004. So anytime we want to amend any of these existing laws, The software I introduced you to, it has an index of all the 552 laws in Nigeria. So all I need to do as a drafter is to search through the index. I will select the law that I want to amend, because amendment means there's an existing law. So for me to amend it, I have to go choose from the index, click on the law that I want to amend before I begin amendment. So this is how I can use ICT in legislative drafting. Another way I can use ICT in legislative drafting is consolidation. Consolidation means, let's give an example. In tax, under the tax laws of Kenya, there may be 200 tax laws from the day of independence to date. There may be a tax law on petroleum profit tax. There may be companies income tax. There may be personnel income tax. These are tax laws passed at different years. So consolidation means you gather all these tax laws together. So it is ICT that can help you to do that. Because if you have a soft copy of this law, a digital copy of these laws, you can gather them from wherever they are, consolidate them into the tax laws of Kenya. Now, at this point, I want to give you an example of the negative use of ICT. Negative, because we also have to tell you about the reality in Africa. Now, in Nigeria, some years ago, we wanted to enact a law called Persons with Disability. Nigeria has over 25 million citizens who have disability, whether physical disability or mental. Some of them are blind, some cannot. So we wanted to pass a law on disability. I'm sure Kenya also has a law. Now, in the process, some greedy people, some mischievous people went online and posted a 1989 decree. In 1989, Nigeria was under the military, and military used to pass laws that we call decrees. So some people went online, posted a so-called law called Persons with Disability Decree 1989. Now, they did it for a purpose. There was a financial gain. They alleged that that was a law passed under the military. And they went and got money from all these international donor agencies. But when we, at the National Assembly, when we look through our laws, even in the archive of the military decrees, there was no such law. The military never passed a law in 1989 called Persons with Disabilities Decree. There was no such law. In fact, the United Nations Convention on Persons with Disabilities, 1995, and Nigeria only assented to it in the year 2002. So how can we have had a law? We did not have such a law. Now, why I'm saying this is, it just shows the importance of ICT. If Nigeria had a digital online version of where our laws are published, we will not have that problem. But currently, as we speak, Nigeria does not have a dedicated website, an online version of all the 552 laws of Nigeria. So you cannot go to a source and say this online to say this is where you can find it. So mischievous people are using it. I'm saying this because some of you are government lawyers. It will be good to tell the government, look, in the United Kingdom, they have a website where all their laws are published. So this is how you can use ICT in a useful, beneficial way. So ICT can also make it standardized. There will be a standardized way to approach the conventions, because drafting has conventions and standards. But if these things are digitized, it will make it easier for us to lay our hands on it. Even the templates, the in-house style, those of you who are professional drafters, there's a man called Taunton. Taunton is the book we use for legislative drafting. It is like the sacred book of legislative drafting. At page 124 of Taunton's book, he says, every legislative drafting office should have a manual, an in-house manual that will tell you what is the style of legislative drafting for you to use in your jurisdiction. Now, it is that in-house manual that will tell you the style, the templates, the layout of legislation in your country. In Nigeria, at the federal level, the style is that definitions are at the bottom. But in some jurisdictions, definitions are at the top, at the beginning of every legislation. So by use of ICT, we can have a standard format. This is the difference between a mechanic and an engineer. An engineer has a defined criteria he uses. It's not, because when you copy legislation from any jurisdiction, it may not be in harmony with your own jurisdiction. So it is ICT that will help us when drafting a new bill to follow the convention. In Canada, as at 1989, they have what they call the Uniform Drafting Conventions, because Canada has different provinces. They have English speaking, they have French speaking. So in 1989, Canada came together and produced a manual called the Uniform Drafting Conventions for legislative drafting. So this is something those of us who are government lawyers can introduce into our jurisdiction. In Nigeria, 2 years ago, we had the Federal Ministry of Justice and the National Assembly. We came together and we produced a manual for legislative drafting so that all lawyers who are in drafting in Nigeria will follow that manual. So this is what ICT can, this is how we can use ICT in legislative drafting, even for paragraphing. After, do you use Roman numerals, subsections? There has to be a guide. So this is what, as legislative drafters, we have to decide within your jurisdiction. It eliminates errors when you do this. And let me give you an example. In Nigeria, we have a multi-ethnic society. So we have different tribes in Nigeria. I am from the southern part of Nigeria. If I am the head of a drafting office in Nigeria, I may have people from northern tribes in Nigeria, western tribe, eastern tribe. Now, you may have a problem. If I give assignments to people to draft, lawyers to draft bills, when they return the bills to me, when I check it, when I mark it, I may say the lawyer from South Nigeria, he scored 100%. And I say to the lawyer from the Eastern Nigeria, you scored 20%. The lawyer from the Eastern Nigeria may not be happy with me. He will say, Dr. Jaja has victimized me because I am not from Southern Nigeria like Dr. Jaja. So the way to avoid this is, if I have a legislative drafting manual, a soft copy or a hard copy, it will be the criteria by which I judge each lawyer in my office. So it reduces inconsistency. So everybody in the office, you know that this is the manual for legislative drafting, and you use that manual. So you cannot accuse Dr. Jaja of tribalism, that I have favored people from my area. That is why the use of ICT makes drafting better. So these are just the benefits. These slides, I will share them with those of you if you send your email. Hello, sorry. So technology, even for international conventions. Now, Nigeria, Kenya, all of us, 54 African countries, most of us are members of the United Nations. And the United Nations drafts conventions. They send it to Kenya for domestication. For you to domesticate, you need these ICT tools to convert a convention to your local legislation. You must have the ICT materials to do that. In Nigeria, we recently passed the climate change law. It is based on the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. And there's a structure for domestication of treaties. When a treaty, the format of a treaty is not the same as our national legislation. So you need a word processor that would help you to convert a treaty into domestic legislation. Nigeria is also a member of the ECOWAS, Economic Community for West African States. The format of legislation of ECOWAS is different from Nigerian national legislation. So you need ICT to work with this kind of legislation. Most of the problem, the litigation in Nigeria, is because many lawyers do not understand the differences and how to domesticate these international legislation. Now, so this, you can also use ICT to create a compendium of laws on the same subject matter. I gave you the example of tax legislation. Especially in Nigeria, in 2013, we created a compendium of indigenous customary laws of Nigeria. Because on marriage alone, Nigeria has over 250 ethnic groups. So there are customary courts in Nigeria. Now, these customary courts, before they can rule, give a judgment on marriage, they need to know what is the custom relating to marriage, what is the custom for land inheritance. So in 2013, Nigeria compiled all the traditional customary laws. We call it Compendium of Customary Laws of Nigeria. We compiled it in 4 areas: marriage, chieftaincy, land, and succession. So that whenever the judges of the customary courts, when they want to decide the case, they can look at those compendium. And this is done with ICT. So this is the use of ICT. Codification of customary law is one way you can use ICT. Remember, this lecture is just to introduce you. We cannot go into all the details, but we're introducing you to how we can use ICT. Now, I believe those of you who are government lawyers, you have law reform commissions. Mr. Johnson, Dr. Johnson Okello was in the Kenyan Law Reform Commission. You also use ICT to consolidate laws, law revision. It is the ICT you use to do that. Now, I will quickly go to specific, when we're using ICT, the first task of any legislative drafter, when you are giving instructions to draft, you don't jump into drafting a law. You need to analyze whether, is there an existing law? Before I draft this law, can the problem be solved by use of other means instead of legislation? Not every problem will be solved by legislation. You can use other means to solve a problem. Education, for example. Let me give you an example. I traveled to India. We went to train Indian lawyers on legislative drafting. India was having a problem called open defecation. For some reason, people like to defecate and urinate on the streets. Even when the government passed a law, said nobody should defecate on this. If you defecate, if you're arrested, $100. People continue to break the law. So some psychologists, sociologists now came up, how can we solve this problem in India? They said, look, one thing, India is a very religious country. 300 million gods are worshipped in India. But the highest god in India is called Vishnu. So the sociologists came up with a solution. Instead of writing, do not urinate here, penalty, $100. What they now wrote is, do not urinate here. The temple of Vishnu was here. And you will not believe it, the problem was solved. Because they understood that this is the psychology of the people. I'll give you an example in Nigeria. Corruption has been a problem in Nigeria and many West African countries. But in 2016, we had a new government, federal government in Nigeria. We have tried everything to solve corruption. We have passed many laws, jail sentence, life imprisonment, death penalty for corruption. Yet the problem of corruption continued. So in 2016, we tried something. We say Nigerians love money. So the government gave a financial incentive called the Whistleblowers Policy. If you report corruption, you will be paid 10% of the money you report. Do you know what happened? People were reporting their parents. Oh, come to my house. My father is hiding $1 million so that I get 10% of it. So the problem of corruption was minimized because of this whistleblower. They say if you are a whistleblower, if you know that somebody has stolen money, come, we'll give you 10%. So as a drafter, before you even draft a law, you have to think, what will be the solution? So you need to do legal research. And these are the 8 things that should guide you when you're doing legal research, especially online legal research. Authority. What does it mean? Who are the authors or the publisher? When you go to a website, you need to ask yourself, is it a government website? 90% of the times, if you're visiting a government website, you are sure that the publication on that website is not a fake publication. So it's better when you start any online research, the first thing you do is ask yourself, who is the author of this website? If it is a government website, good. But if it is a private website, you have to be careful because I gave you the example of people that went and concocted a decree called Persons with Disability Decree 1989, when there was nothing like that. People have their agenda. So whoever is the author of the website, it is good to confirm that you're visiting a government website. And usually you look at the email website address. Government websites always have .gov. In Nigeria is .ng. In UK is .gov.uk. Now some crafty people, they will go and put .gov.com. You have to be careful. Look at the website very well. This in Nigeria, there's a scam going on, all this American visa. They go and create, it will look like the American government embassy website, but it is USA.gov.com, not USA. So you have to be careful. So once you confirm that it is a government website, then you can take information from it for your legal research. Now, the next thing you need to know is the accuracy. I am a lecturer, so I also supervise master's students. Yesterday, A student brought his project, and I've been doing the project since last year. But yesterday he brought the final version of the of the dissertation. I now looked at it. I now noticed at the footnote, the reference is assessed 2013. That raised a red flag in my head. That means this project is a copy from somebody that did the research 2013. Because if he was the one that is doing the research, the date of assessing the website should be 2021 at least. So when you're visiting a website, what is the accuracy of the information? The date. You don't just go to a website, you check the date the information was posted. The date, is it accurate? So even if, for example, the Nigerian population in 2000, if you go to the Nigerian Population Commission website, the population of Nigeria 10 years ago was about 120 million, but now it is 200 million. So you have to be accurate when you're visiting a website. Look for the accurate information, the most up-to-date information. Now, objective. Now, when you visit a website, you need to ask yourself, what is the agenda of the person that created the website? So you have to be balanced. If the person has an agenda, you should know that the information presented in that website will be biased. Objective. So you have to look for objective statistics. What is the number of laws passed by the Nigerian National Assembly? I have given you a figure, 552. But if you go to another website of maybe an NGO that is against fighting the government, they will tell you that it is 244 laws. But that 244 laws is only the number of laws passed since 1999 when Nigeria returned to democracy. So you have to know, ask yourself, these websites, are they objective? Before you copy information from them, what agenda are they pushing? Because they may present the information with bias. What is the date of publication? Is it a current information? Is it updated? You have to ask yourself that. Now, how comprehensive is the information? Now, if you're visiting a website on tax, you have to ask yourself, is this information in depth? Does it cover the whole scope of tax legislation, or is it just speaking on companies' tax? What about other aspects of taxation? Reliability. You have to make sure that this website you're visiting is reliable. And then, is it organized? Can you do a search? Most African countries, we now have what we call African Legal Information Institutes. They have websites. So you can search. Security. Is it something you can? There's a way to check. Those of you that work in government offices, HTTP, for you to know whether a website is secure. HTTP. S. When you put, if there's S, HTTPS, that means it's a secure website. But if it is HTTP, then it is not a secure website. These are things you need to know when you're doing legal research. So that's the end of this legal research presentation. I'm sure that there will be questions. But before we go to the questions, I already see that there's a lot of comments on the comment section. Before we go there, let's do the second slide. I will run through the second slide. Remember, I said this is an introduction to give you the tools, the knowledge to make you an engineer. They have the mindset of an engineer. An engineer has a formal training. He understands the principles behind legislation before he goes into drafting. But a mechanic, he does trial and error. Now, let me introduce you to the basic structure of legislation and bills, because this is what will help you to, before you even draft, even if you're copying legislation from another jurisdiction. Now, there's an innovation in legislative drafting, which I want to introduce you to. In most countries in Europe, Nigeria, from the year 2011, we have adopted this style of drafting. Now, we do not only draft bills. When we submit bills to our National Assembly in Nigeria, you are required to provide a compendium of financial implications of the bill. Financial implication means how much will it cost the government to execute this bill? So since 2011, what we do in Nigeria, whenever you submit a bill to our National Assembly, you have to do a document called a compendium of the financial implications of the bill. So that will tell the government whether this is expensive or is cheap to do this. Now, the reason, I must give you the background in Nigeria. In 2011 in Nigeria, we set up a committee to look at why the cost of governance was becoming too much for Nigerians. So we set up a committee. We found out that we have over 900 federal government agencies. And we found out that out of these 900 agencies, only 261 are relevant. 261 are the agencies we need out of 900. So the other agencies were duplications of that 261. So from that year, we now said to reduce the number of agencies, before you bring a bill to the National Assembly to establish an agency, you must show us the financial implication. That is the cost and the benefit analysis, just to let the government know that whether we need a new agency or not. So this is something that we are doing in our jurisdiction. I'm sure Kenya is doing the same, and other jurisdictions are also doing the same. Now, this is the steps to before you can draft, or this is the legislative drafting process. It has 5 steps. You have to understand the drafting instructions, you analyze, you design before you compose, that is before you draft. Then after you draft, it needs to be scrutinized. In the United Kingdom, they have a parliamentary council office. This office, they have what they call the 4 eyes principle. 4 eyes means for every bill, there are 2 legislative drafters and there are 2 people, lawyers, who are checking what the drafters are doing. Because after you draft, somebody needs to check whether what you have drafted is correct. Now, this is the 4 main parts of every bill. Every bill has 4 major parts: preliminary provisions, principal provisions, miscellaneous provisions, and the final provisions. Now, these are the subdivisions of those parts. The preliminary provisions you'll have the long title, preamble, enacting clause, purpose clause. This is something I will share with you. So the slides will be sent to you. Now, for the principal provisions, you have the substantive and then the administrative. Administrative provisions means if you draft a bill to create an agency, then you have to create the tenure of office for the Director General, how board meetings will be held. In Nigeria, we have what we call the Federal Character Principle in Section 14 of our Constitution. It says that for every federal government agency, there must be a representative from each of the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria. Nigeria has 6 geopolitical zones. So you must appoint one person from each of the 6 geopolitical zones as a member of the board of that federal government agencies. So it's very important. There's a law in Nigeria that was passed in August 2021. Just because the drafters did not include the federal character principle in that law, by October, the president sent that law back to the National Assembly for amendment. So that's why it is important to follow this structure. Now, we have, if these administrative provisions are too many, you can create a schedule. A schedule means an annexure to the law. That's where you put details of that other things you want to put, the details, you put them in the schedule to the law. Now, let me tell you about miscellaneous provisions. Miscellaneous provisions are things that may be necessary to include. Now, when I was teaching this class in my LLM class, we said the example we can use is a lady's handbag. Every lady carries a handbag. Now, that handbag is like a bill. Let's use the example, it's like a law. Now you have put the preliminary, you have put the principal provisions. You need to put miscellaneous items. Miscellaneous items are items that they are not really the core, they are not really the substance, but eventually you may need them. Something may come up and you need them. So when we were teaching this lecture in our LLM class, we were having bad seats in class. So one of our gentlemen sat down and his trouser got torn. Incidentally, a lady in her handbag, she had needle and thread. So she used the needle and thread to stitch the trouser of that man before he went home. So that needle and thread is like a miscellaneous item inside the handbag of that lady. It has solved the problem before the man will go home and maybe have a major repair of his trouser. So in every law, you need to think of what are the miscellaneous things that may happen. And you put those things there. I give you an example. We have a road safety law in Nigeria. When we drafted that law, we did not think the penalty, if you're driving against traffic, the penalty then was 50 naira. And 50 naira, that law was 1989. 20 years later, in 2019, that 50 naira is a small amount. So you need to amend, go back to National Assembly to amend that law. However, if the drafters of that law had put a miscellaneous provision to give the judge discretion to increase the penalty, the fine, then there will be no need to go back for amendment. Another example is our petroleum law, 1969 petroleum law. There was no miscellaneous provision for if you apply for a license to drill oil and the minister revokes your license, what is the method of appeal? How were you able to appeal? The law did not provide for it. So these are examples of miscellaneous provision. Then under the final provisions, you have savings and transitional. Sometimes an agency, a new agency is created, but there is an already existing agency. You have to save the jobs of those agency people and transit them into a new agency. If you do not mention it specifically, then it will not be. Those people have lost their jobs. Because those of us in commonwealth or common law jurisdiction, we err on the side of surplus. Anything that is not specifically written in the bill, you cannot, it's not implied. We have what we call the Mongoose Principle. Mongoose Principle means you err on the side of surplus. So these are the details of under the preliminary provisions. This is the principal provision. These are the details. This is the miscellaneous power to make regulation. This is the final provisions. For you, whenever you're drafting a new law, you have to look at the laws of Kenya, all the laws. You have to look at the index to make sure that it does not have an effect on existing law. If it has an effect, you have to do what we call consequential amendments. So in fact, sometimes you have to even do repeals. If it is too long, you have to create a schedule. Now, the language of legislation. Every legislation is made up of sentence. The legislative sentence has 4 parts. I will introduce you to the 4 parts of a legislative sentence: the legal action, the legal subject, the case, and the condition. This is over 150 years ago. An English barrister called George Coode designed this for us. But we have modernized it now. The modern way is that the legal subject comes first. Then you have the case and the condition. So I'm going to share this slide with you so that you know how a legislative sentence is framed. So let me give you an example. The minister may prohibit, or let's say the minister prohibits cars on Nigerian roads from exceeding 20 kilometers per hour. So in that sentence, the minister is the legal subject. The legal action is prohibits. The case is on Nigerian roads, 20 kilometers on Nigerian road per hour in Nigerian roads. So I've made a legislative sentence. Now, I have not created condition. If there is such a law, the minister prohibits cars from exceeding 20 kilometers per hour on Nigerian roads. If you just make a law like that, that means you have excluded a lot of things. So I need to create conditions where that law can be broken. So for example, what about the police? When the police is chasing a thief, they cannot keep to 20 kilometers per hour. What about ambulance? Taking a sick person to hospital. So I can create conditions. The minister may prohibit any car from exceeding 20 kilometers per hour on Nigerian roads, except number 1, police cars. Number 2, ambulance. Number 3, the convoy of the president of Nigeria. Those are conditions. And then you need to know that in drafting, there are 2 words, shall and may. Shall is mandatory when you want something to be mandatory. May is a discretion when you want the judge to have a discretion or somebody to have discretion. So on these notes, then there's also gender neutral drafting. You don't say draft man, you say draft person. Not chairman, you say chairperson. This is a modern way that we draft. There's also plain language in legislative drafting. Plain language means make the language simple for ordinary person to understand. So ladies and gentlemen, on this note, I've spoken enough. I would like us to pause and take questions and answers. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Clinton. I think that was quite refreshing for for those who are in the drafting world and those who are interested in the drafting world. Colleagues, just a quick recap. First, before we proceed to questions and answer, remember to share your email and WhatsApp number so that Dr. Clinton and his group of Aldrap can share with us the basic software that they have developed that is available for free to all participants attending this session, and also you'll be able to share a journal. So please don't forget, don't log out before you share those details. Then a quick recap. We've just learned that what we need to do is to have the mindset of a drafter, so that when you are drafting or developing a legislation, you have that mindset of a drafter, not just mechanical. I know lawyers, we like using what we call precedents. So every time you're given a transaction or something to do, the first question you ask is, do you have a precedent? Now, we want to go beyond that and have the mind of a drafter when you're drafting legislation. We've seen what ICT tools can help us do in the world of legal research, in the world of legislative drafting. We've just been taught that one of the critical benefits of ICT is the use of standardization of format, design, jurisdictional styles, and all that. So I think this is very, very enriching. And so without much ado, let us get some responses. I think what we'll do in the interest of time, because I really want us to stop at exactly 4 latest. If you have questions, please, you can post them at the Q&A. I hope, Dr. Clinton, you can access the Q&A portion of the screen. So please post your questions, your comments, but you can also raise your hand and David David can help us identify those whose hands are up for purposes of contributing. So please, let's hit the road running. Let's have questions, your questions coming through, your comments, and feel free. I can see, let's see.
Okay, so can I start with, I see in the Q&A, one uses manual. Okay, that's about the question. I am following on phone, struggle to note, okay. Kindly explain the requirements of a repeal and an amendment. Okay, so let's go to that question. A repeal, you can repeal an entire law. When you repeal an entire law and you are bringing a new law, in brackets, you're supposed to write that repeal and reenactment. Let me give you an example. So, for example, if we have an agency like National Institute for Legislative Studies, and over the time, there has been so much amendments of that law. Let's say 70% of that law has been amended over time. It is best for us to repeal and reenact. So in bracket, the new law we are drafting will be called National Institute for Legislative Studies. In bracket, Repeal and Reenactment Act. So I don't know if I've answered those. Now, an amendment, if there's a law that affects certain aspects of existing laws are affected by a bill, you amend those sections. Section 1, let me give you an example. This morning, before I gave your lecture, Nigeria has what we call the Nigerian Civil Security and Civil Defense Corps. It's a security organization. It was established in the year 2003. Now, there's a bill at the National Assembly to repeal that law, because the bill says, why don't we move this agency to the Nigerian police? So the law will repeal the Nigerian Civil Defense Corps and transfer them to the Nigerian police. I don't know if you, so that's an outright repeal. That organization will no longer exist if the bill is successful. So because they said the cost of running that agency is too much, and for administrative purposes, they should be under the Nigerian police. However, there was another bill that I worked on some years ago. It's called the Nigerian Anti-Vandalization Agency Bill. The purpose of that law was to create an agency that will be arresting people who vandalize government facilities. So that, when I read the bill, I now said, there's no need for this new agency, because the Nigerian Security Defense Corps, Section 3 of it says the duty of the Security Defense Corps is to arrest vandals, vandalization of government property. But let me assume that I had proposed that this vandalization agency should come on board. If it was successful, then the vandalization agency under the Consequential Amendments will amend Section 3 of the existing Nigerian Security Defense Corps Law, 2003. So it's a very tasking task. It's a very hard job. What you need to do when you are drafting a new law, what we do in Nigeria, or what I do, not every lawyer is keen to do it. You need to go to the index of the laws of the Federation of Nigeria, 552 laws. You start looking at each of them to make sure that this new bill you're drafting, if it's going to impact on any of the existing 552 laws, you need to amend those sections that are supposed to have an impact.
Okay.
So I don't.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. I think you've tried to answer the question fairly well. Before I go to the colleagues raising their hands, they prepare, please, those who are raising their hands, I can see there is Doreen, Jacinta, there's Ada, there is one by the name X4 2019, there is Caritas. Please just hold and prepare your comments, questions. I'll give you 1 minute each, but let me first ask Dr. Jaja to respond to the following as the others wait. Let's, Dr. Jaja, two quick ones. There are 2 questions from Idi Aparai. One, are there resources available to prepare a course on legislative drafting for undergraduate law students? Resources available, that's the first question. Number 2, so again from Idi, what are the source books that you would recommend as authority on legislative drafting? You've already mentioned one, Thornton, but you could speak to others. We have the late Professor Crabb has written a number of books, so you could speak to that also. The third question is from Dr. Tijani Abdul. Why is it that drafters don't use will, the whole idea of future? you normally, drafters will use the word shall, which they have murdered so many times and resurrected, shall and all that. We don't like using the word will, so that we don't say a person will be prosecuted. So why don't we use the word will? Then there is Lawrence Alado. Hello, Dr. Clinton. Would you argue that the framework, and I believe you may be referring to this framework you are discussing, that the framework must be adopted by all African countries, especially as we advance towards cross-border legal practice? And then 2 more questions on the wall from Muridhi Kanampiu. Public participation is a major headache in Kenya. I think let's just say Kenya. Maybe just to give a quick background, there's a constitutional requirement. I don't know that we have participants from South Africa here, but there's a constitutional requirement. These are a mongrel that Kenya borrowed from South Africa, where everything, every legislation, legislative process, policy, whenever you are developing such documents, there must be public participation. The big question is, what is this public participation? What is sufficient public participation? The quality, all that. So Dr. Jaja, you may want to comment on that. And lastly, allow me to take the question from Josephine Oyombe, a question on the automated amendment of laws online. What security measures has Nigeria put in place to maintain authentic amendments of the law, so that you protect the law, of course, from being hacked or hackers changing the content and all that? And then from Kevin Mpaka, I think Kevin is just making a comment. Thank you, Kevin. So let me stop at that. Dr. Clinton, please speak to those. Then when you come back, I will be giving opportunity to the 6 colleagues who have put up their hands for comments. Dr. Clinton?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. So let me start from the last, automated amendment. I can tell you, that what we did, I told you 2 years ago, we got funding from, I think it was the British government, for we call it the e-library. The e-library. So all the treaties of Nigeria, we started with the treaties. The Federal Ministry of Justice, there's a law that says the Federal Ministry of Justice is the depository of all our laws in Nigeria. So we got funding and we established an e-library. So that is secure because we got funding from foreign partners. And you know, anything the United Kingdom does, they do it well. So and of course, the gazetted copy, our laws, we have a law called the Acts Authentication Act, 1961. So anytime there's any law passed by the National Assembly, it is the Minister of Justice, the Attorney General of the Federation, that produces a gazette copy. So the authentic version of all Nigerian laws are in the custody of the Federal Ministry of Justice. So we have started with the treaties, we have digitized the treaties, but we are still struggling with the other laws, the 552 laws. So that web's e-library is foolproof. Hackers cannot gain access to it. So that's what we're doing as a country. So your respective jurisdictions can find a way to deal with that. And then, because when you have the digital e-library, then you can have access to amendment of the laws. Now, one of the problems, I'll give you an example. The synergy, I work with the National Assembly. The Ministry of Justice is a different organization, but we have not created that synergy Let me give you an example. In 2019, the president of Nigeria assented to a law passed by National Assembly, Persons with Disability Law, 2019. However, by 2020, we in the National Assembly, we were invited to amend that law, that 2019 law. The reason is because when that law was being drafted, it was an executive bill. They did not consult with National Assembly. So there were gaps in that law. I give you an example. That law was supposed to be a domestication of the 1995 United Nations Convention on Persons with Disability. And Article 3 of that United Nations Convention says, whenever there is an election, the electoral body must print the ballot paper for persons who are blind in Braille language. There must be access to persons with disability during elections. But because when we drafted our 2019 laws on disability, we did not annex the United Nations Convention 1995. The practice in Nigeria is, if you're domesticating a treaty, you have to attach that treaty as an annexure to that law. But because we failed to do that, by 2020, we had to amend our Persons with Disability law so that we include the rights of persons with disability during election. So you can see the gap. Because we are not working together, there is a gap. I hope I've answered that question. It would have been automated if the Federal Ministry of Justice synergizes with the National Assembly. We can share information. But because we are not sharing this information, 1 year later, we're amending a law that was passed in 2019.
Yep.
So the next question is public participation. In Nigeria, we have Section 52 says there must be public hearing. Public hearing means when a law is to be passed, members of the public are supposed to be invited. They are supposed to submit memorandum to the National Assembly so that the members of the citizens should say what they want about that law. It is a requirement in our constitution. However, the constitution, the drafters of the constitution fail to mention what is the penalty. And remember, when our constitution was drafted, our constitution is 1999. So we did not mention whether, is it sufficient for me to send electronic copy to the National Assembly of my memorandum? Or must I be physically present in Abuja? The National Assembly of Nigeria is in the headquarters in Abuja. 40% of Nigerians live below poverty line. So can they afford transport to come to National Assembly in the capital to make sure they participate in the legislative process? These are things you need to, in 2006, the UK passed a law called Legislative and Regulatory Reform Act 2006. That law says that before any law is passed by the UK Parliament, there must be public consultation. And for the public consultation, they have a document. You are supposed to show evidence that the participants have filled. So it's not a subjective thing. There's a document in the UK where every parliament, the committee must show that they have held public participation. And that document is the evidence. There will be signature by the participants. And for example, when you are doing a law, they call it charities. All the charities, at least, they say 50% of the charity organizations in the UK must show that they participated before you pass the law. So this is why we say drafting has changed to a scientific thing. It is no longer, so I don't know about how the Kenyan constitution is worded. There needs to be a criteria. For example, you should say 50% of local governments. Nigeria has 774 local governments. So, for example, in section 10 of the Nigerian Constitution, when you are passing before Nigeria would domesticate a treaty on a subject matter that is on the concurrent list, you need 25 of the states of Nigeria. 25 represents 1/3. Nigeria has 36 states. So you need the houses of assemblies of the regional governments. You need 25 to endorse before you can pass a constitutional amendment. So I don't know, maybe it's a problem of Kenya has not defined the number of people that will participate before you say public participation has been achieved. Then let me answer the question of cross-border practice. Yes, somebody also asked whether this software can be used in East Africa. Yes, when we went to the Gambia, all we needed to do, because the software has, if for amendments, you need all the electronic copies of the laws of Nigeria in the software. So what we did in Gambia, we removed Nigerian laws, we put the Gambian laws. So long as you have the soft copies of your country, we can put it there in the software so that when you want to amend, you click on that law, that particular law. So it can be used. It's a very simplified software. And
thank you.
Yes. So somebody asked on authorities on legislative drafting. Now, taunting is the what we call the locus classicus when it comes to legislative drafting. Is the authority. But when it comes to Africa, the late Crab, there was a man called Vincent Crab. He's a Ghanaian. He died, I think, 2 or 3 years ago.
2 years ago?
Yes, I had the privilege of, we did a training together. He's the authority in Africa when it comes, because he wrote with examples from Africa. So when you read these foreign books on legislative drafting, they'll tell you about regulation. Their understanding of regulation is different from us. I'll give you an example. Most of the European countries are civil law jurisdictions. Most African countries are common law jurisdictions. So there's a difference. For example, in civil law, they use what they call purpose clause. In France, they call it chapeau. Chapeau means the purpose clause tells you what is the purpose of that law. And the reason why they use this is because their style of interpretation is different. In civil law countries such as France, a judge can read meaning into a law. Even if something is not written, he can say, oh, this is the intention of parliament. But in common law, the judges don't have that liberty. They follow strictly what is written. So these small differences. So when you are looking at textbooks from European writers, it gives you a problem. But Crab his book is a 1993 legislative drafting by Crab, Vincent Crab. So he's an authority. But what we have done in Nigeria, myself and a senior advocate of Nigeria, she's also a lecturer in our institute. We designed this for Nigeria. So you need something that is also domestic to your this thing. Then finally, the last question, will and shall. I will give you the history of legislative drafting so that you know why we use conventions, why we stick to conventions. Remember, we started by saying mechanic and engineer. Mechanic is somebody that does trial and error. He does not know why he thinks the car is working the way. So he'll keep doing trial and error. But an engineer is somebody that uses a scientific method. He has already, in his laboratory, he has already tried certain methods, experiments, before he comes up with, this is the best. So in legislative drafting, over the years, you must know how the legal profession evolved. Those of you, before, when you were at law school, we got our legal profession. We inherited it from England. The legal profession was created in England. And out of that legal profession, in the year 1869, legislative drafting broke away as a specialized aspect of the legal profession. There was a reason. The Parliament of England was complaining because the bills that used to be drafted by lawyers used to be very voluminous and full of all these words. There shall henceforth, hereinafter. So those parliamentarians, they are not lawyers. They were not happy that why should a document, a bill, have so much confusing language? But you must know the history. In England, in those days, lawyers were paid according to how the words they draft. So the more words you have in a legal document, the more you make money. So that's why legal documents were very voluminous. But in 1869, the Parliament said, no, we don't want general lawyers to be drafting bills for us. They created an office. It was established by law called Office of Parliamentary Counsel. That is the lawyers who will be drafting for parliaments. And they told these lawyers, please don't be using those legal language, legalese. Make it simple. So that is why we draft the way we draft, shall instead of will, so that litigation will be reduced. So this is something that has been tried and tested, and we arrived at this. The first man to head the Office of Parliamentary Counsel is called Henry Thring. He developed what we call the 5 principles of the structure of legislation. So these are things that have been tried and tested before we arrived at these legislative drafting conventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clinton. I believe we've addressed all the questions. Time is running out. Allow me to ask David, wherever you are, I would request that you unmute the following participants so that they can put their questions if they are not addressed, or their comments. And please, participants, I'm speaking to Doreen, whose hand is up, Flavia, Jacinta, and Juguna. I'll give you only 1 minute, so 1 minute each. So David, timekeeper, 1 minute, okay? So let's start with Doreen Olarenyu. Doreen, are you there?
Doreen has been permitted to talk. Just unmute and go ahead.
Doreen, unmute and go ahead. Doreen appears to be muted. Okay, Flavia, Charles? Flavia? Flavia, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, yes, Flavia is there.
Yes, good afternoon. And thank you so much, Moderator. Thank you to Dr. Jaja for such a very rich knowledge. Really appreciate for that. And thanks to ELS for organizing this. So I have 2 questions, and I'll go straight to the question. And the question number 1, it goes straight to about drafting. When Doctor was trying to discuss, I realized that the drafting is more centered to lecturers who are teaching at university, but also the government employees for preparing the bills which goes to the government. Now, my issue is, and I want Dr. Jaja to expound more about the role of private practitioners on how we can tap with. I just want him to expound more than that. I know he touched a little bit, but I want to hear more about that, about those private practitioners on how they can tap with and how they can play the role in this kind of bill drafting. But also the question number 2 is about innovations. Dr. Jaja, you've touched on the issue of financial implications, that when you're drafting now with the new innovation, that you have to include the financial part of it. Now, I'm just thinking, and this is confusing me, that imagine you're having electoral law. You are preparing the bill, which in turn will come as the electoral law. Now, how do you put the budget? My question is, what limit? Where do we start and where do we end? Because how do you put the budget for the implementation of electoral law, which is going to run for years, and they got a lot of things and a lot of parties are going to be involved? What are you talking? Are you talking about the implementation, the drafting part, or you're talking about the implementation in the whole sum of the law? I don't get it. But also the third one is about you talked about the outdated, whether the law, the
you finalize with that?
Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah, Doctor, you were talking about the issues the issue of our current literacies or the websites. So now my question was, how listened is listened? Because for example, in Tanzania, you can find that the election of the issue of now this year we're going to have what we call counting of people. You remind me. So we're going to have
census.
Yes, census. Thank you so much, Doctor. So now the last census was done more than 10 years. And you can find, sometimes you can find even the recent news, which was written in a particular case, is of 1960s. And that is the last literacy. Yes, it's outdated, but that's a recent one. So how do you talk about that? I want you to speak a little bit about that. But the last one is about bias. The last one, sorry for that, the last one is about bias. We know that most bills are put in the government website, and we all know the intention of the government. Now, when you're talking about biasness, I want you to explain that, because when you got the government website, that's a reliable website, and the intention of the government putting there, we all know what is it. So when you go to lead for the activities, you saw maybe the activists who are trying to discuss about that, they'll be on that side of their angle, but with the government, not the intention, how do you do it? That's the only way. You need to adapt to what they have put in, and you need to work on that. Thank you so much, Moderator.
Thank you. Let me go quick. Because of time, let me take this quickly. So let me start from the last part, the bias. As lawyers, we know when you have a case in court, the judge has to decide on preponderance of evidence. So apart from the government's source of data, you have other organizations, reliable organizations, the World Bank, the UNDP. If they work in your country and you are doing a research on victims of abuse, gender abuse, you can reference this. If the government says 50% of women in Kenya are abused, UNDP says 55. World Bank says 60. At least you are within a range. It gives you an idea. So another way is, if there is no available statistics, there's nothing wrong with you doing your own research. The number of how many women are members of parliament in Kenya. You can go to the clerk of the Parliament of Kenya and ask for the number. And you can verify from the website of Kenya how many women. And I have had course. For example, I had to find out how many legislative drafters are in Nigeria. There's no government data on it. So I had to go through the 36 states of Nigeria. Each has a state house of assembly. How many lawyers are working there? You get your statistics. So sometimes you have to generate data yourself, because to avoid bias, you can generate your data, but you can also cross-check. Your government gives you 50%, say data is 50, you check with UNDP, you check with World Bank, because this World Bank is considered a source of reliable information. Then the second question you asked is about census. In Nigeria, census is also a very political issue because it affects the voting. Whoever has a more number of population is likely to win the votes. So census is always a very political issue. We have what we call the National Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria. They are the ones, they control government statistics. But for census, we have the National Population Commission. They carry out census. But most times, we find out that the UNDP has, the UN has what they call United Nations Population something agency. So sometimes we have to cross-check with them. They tell us the population of Nigeria is within 200 million. This is before, the last census in Nigeria is 2006. So we are currently relying on the UN statistics, which is telling us 200 million. Until we carry out a census, we cannot say for sure this is. So you have to. Then innovations in legislative drafting. Now this financial implication, we are not asking you as a lawyer to become an accountant. You cannot carry out so we call it estimates. So if we are establishing a new government agency, we want you to give us what is the estimated number of staff they will employ for 1 year. The estimate is just for 1 year. What is the salary? How many, if there are 50 staff, how much salary? How much is the rent of the building where they will use? You give us an estimate for 1 year. So it's an estimate. We don't expect a lawyer to become a chartered accountant. No, it's just an estimate to indicate to the government that, oh, this is what you spend, but this is the benefits. Estimated benefit. Okay, if we open a Nigerian agency for mining of solid minerals, in 1 year, the government will get revenue from licenses will be $200 million. You give an estimate. So that $200 is more than the administrative costs for 50 staff. So the government will be happy to see that, oh, this is a good agency. So we pass the law to establish that agency. Then finally, your first question, private legal practitioners. Yes, in Nigeria, private legal practitioners are allowed to draft bills for legislators because some legislators have a goal. They say, for the 4 years while I'm in the national parliament, I want to sponsor 200 laws, bills. So they can engage private legal practitioners to draft bills for them. And all that these private legal practitioners need to do is to follow the style, the manual, the house style of the Nigerian National Assembly. So they're allowed to draft for legislators, but they need to comply, make sure that the bill complies with the style. Now, in Nigeria, we are amending the Legal Practitioners Act. Recently, it is a 1970 law, so we're amending it. And our association, Aldrap, of legislative drafting lawyers, we went to National Parliament of Nigeria. We submitted a memorandum. We said, among the practice areas identified as arbitration, criminal law, we asked the National Assembly, please include legislative drafting, and they have done that. So private legal practitioners, the Nigerian Bar Association has also approved legislative drafting as an area for continuing legal education. So if I was doing this training for Nigerian lawyers, they can take they can use it for continuing legal education because every year you're supposed to attend 48 hours. So they can use it to renew their license. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clinton. Colleagues, I can see Jacinta's hands up, I can see Wambui Kamau's hands up, I can see Juguna Peter, you have your hand up. And again, our time is not aside. I can also see a number of questions. I'm seeing Henry Marias is asking between a bill and an act. Just a quick one, an act is a legislative proposal that has already gone through the entire legislative process. It has been passed and assented to, and it is a law that is operating. A bill is a legislative proposal, which is yet to be enacted by Parliament. Then Wamboi is talking about the contribution of Kenya, the kenyalaw.org. I know I'll ask you to log into kenyalaw.org. They're doing a fantastic job. They have a lot of legislation and bills in Kenya that are available online. So again, Wamboi will allow me, we will not address the question today, but I believe I'm throwing a challenge to David, ELS. Please, David, let this be the second of the process. I think by public demand, would want to have Dr. Clinton back to finalize so that we continue with this series. I'm seeing Edie, you're asking about Vincent Crabbe. Yes, you've got the spelling. Crabbe is C-R-A-B-B-E. You got it right. Yeah, basically that is it. Colleagues, let us leave it at that. We take a break for today. I'm sure with this test, you will be looking forward to more of these sessions. Again, Jacinta, Wamboi, and Juguna, please forgive me. I'm sure we'll have another session another day. Allow me to thank, allow me to especially thank Dr. Clinton for availing time and even for sharing with us the good work that is happening and going on in Nigeria in terms of drafting. Thank you for offering to give the participants the software. I think this will be a good starting point for us to grow further. Otherwise, I appreciate all of you. Thank you, wonderful people of Africa. We appreciate your presence. And thank you, Dr. Clinton. Back to you, David.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clinton. I think this was more excellent sessions. I believe everyone on board has greatly benefited, myself included. I have recently also gotten into this area of legislative drafting as I deal with a lot of policy at the regional level. And hold speak to being an expert to see an area that you can help us in, or those areas that have been pointed out, and any other additional areas. Remember, we have this legislative bit, and we also have the initial or the original legal drafting. I remember during your presentation, Dr. Jaja, you spoke about use of language, simple language that is devoid of legalese. We did that last time. We are also scaling that up. So we're going to scale both sides, both in the legislative arm and in the legal drafting bit of things. And so thank you all to all of you. We're going to share the reports. We're going to discuss with Dr. Jaja how to reach software. I believe this is something you can apply to make your work easier as you do you undertake drafting in your daily activities. So thank you very much to all of you. We wish you a nice week, nice weekend. I don't know that Dr. Clinton, you have something to add as we finalize?
Yes, I just saw a question there that someone was saying we need a certificate. As I told you, we normally organize this training for Nigerian Bar Association and we give certificates. But for you to get the certificate, there is a short written assignment. and then a test will hear you participate. So with the kind permission of David and the East African Law Society Institute, if we can have another session where it will be participation and then a short written test, so that, because before we issue certificates, we want to know that at least you have a basic knowledge of legislative drafting. So I think that's something we can try.
Thank you, Dr. Jaja. I think what we did last time, before we issue certificates, normally, because a certificate is not just issued out, we host, say, 2, 3, 4 thorough sessions, and then there's the examination part, like you've said, to get the understanding. Have you understood the content? So that we are not an institute that just offers certificate. There's some quality standard to it. You have to have gone through a number of minutes of, say, training, and then that small test to gauge the understanding, and then you get a certificate. So going forward, we will plan this out, get an elaborate kind of syllabus, then deliver it, and then we issue the certificates to you. So this is I'm going to go into discussion with both Dr. Okello and Dr. Jaja, and then we're going to have a kind of syllabus. Then once you complete the syllabus, you take that test and you pass, we're going to give you a certificate. So thank you very much, and thank you for the interest in these sessions, and thank you for your time, both as a participant and to our panelists of the day. Thank you so much. We're going to come back with the report, the recording, in case you missed anything, you're going to get it. And of course, thank you, Dr. Jaja. We're going to share with you the software and probably the manual on how to use it to enable you, easily apply the information that you're going to get. Thank you. Have a nice evening. For you, Dr. Jaja, have a nice day. I know it's still early in Abuja. Thank you.